Hey there, Trekkies! This is the beginning of a new series where we'll pull on one of those cosmic threads that separates realities and theorize what the Star Trek universe might be like. The thread we're plucking today will change the course of the Dominion War. What if the Prophets hadn't kept the Dominion fleet from entering the Alpha Quadrant in Sacrifice of Angels?
Alternate Trek history.
The universe is as we know it, up until the moment the Defiant enters the wormhole and finds thousands of Dominion ships waiting for them, remains the same. Sisko still pleads with the Prophets for help, but it falls on deaf ears. Sensing his willingness to lay down his life, the Prophets still need the Sisko and call him home to the temple early to be used at a future time to complete their task for him. The Defiant is left captainless at the mercy of thousands of Dominion ships. While Dax would follow any order Benjamin gave, no matter the cost, she assumes command as the Defiant starts taking damage, and barely escapes the wormhole ahead of the Dominion fleet. Terok Nor's weapons are still down, which allows the Defiant to get back to the end of the battle that had started to go in the favor of the Federation Klingon fleet. Unfortunately, Kira, Quark, Rom, Zial, and Jake Sisko are not long for this world. The fresh infusion of Dominion troops resecures the station, and their originally planned executions are carried out. While the loss of Dukat's daughter does weigh on him, it doesn't cause a mental collapse like it did in the original history, since at least he did his duty and held control of Terok Nor. With all the ships, Ketracel White, and supply lines they need, there's little stopping the Dominion from taking over Federation and Klingon territory. Though the war will last far longer than the year or so it ended in the original timeline, and cost far more lives on both sides. For what it's worth, Jadzia's cunning sees her live longer than she did in the Prime timeline, working as a liaison to the Klingon Empire with Worf. After 5 years and billions of extra lives lost, though, she just dons Klingon armor after the Federation finally collapses to the severe mismatch it faced. The Romulans never joined the Federation's cause, though neither did the Breen join the Dominion in this scenario. And though Dukat's rubber-stamped the Dominion's will for years, he starts to realize this deal's getting worse all the time, and with Damar starts to undermine their overlord's will. First, little bits at a time, but eventually he fulfills his destiny as not just a puppet of the Dominion, but of the Pa-Wraiths, and ends up closing the wormhole like he did in the Prime timeline, but in this universe he's actively working against them and cutting off the flow of Gamma Quadrant supplies. After seeing how they're treated as second-class citizens in their own space, many Cardassian soldiers join Dukat in fleeing Cardassian space with hundreds of warships, and join the remnants of Federation forces on the far side of Romulan space in the Beta Quadrant. With no great powers opposing them, the Dominion starts blockading Romulan space in an effort to force them to fully join the Dominion. They do this to the Gorn Hegemony, Ferengi Alliance, Breen Confederation, and Sheliak Corporate also. Their overreach is where the tide begins to turn. As Prime Timeline Sisko did, Dukat conceives a back-channel plot to convince the Romulans it's time to fight back, and they allow the rebel Cardassians and Federation remnants to set up bases in the former Neutral Zone area. The pressure causes the other Alpha and Beta Quadrant minor powers to finally join the cause as well. They spend a few more years on a bloody retaking of mostly Federation territory and pushing the Dominion back into Cardassian space. Most ironically, it's Dukat himself receiving cryptic orders from the Pa-Wraiths that goes on a quest to Tyree to find the Orb of the Emissary and reopen the wormhole so the Wraiths can finally enter it in force. During the preceding years, Kai Wynn has taken control of Bajor and sides with the Dominion fully out of necessity, with no one else to turn to for trade. Ironically, the Dominion succeeds in unifying Cardassians and Bajorans under a common banner. Though predictably, after decades of rebellion, the Bajorans form a new underground, partially filled with Cardassians in its ranks. They only manage low-level disruptions, but as the new Alpha Quadrant Alliance starts gaining real ground, and the war comes back to Bajor's front door, they step up their attacks on Dominion targets. They're further emboldened by the return of the Sisko, who suddenly reappears on Bajor. Apparently, this is now his time in history to fight the bigger war between the Prophets and Pa-Wraiths. After a major battle for the Alliance to take Terok Nor from the Dominion, Sisko is again made the commander of the station for the final phase of pushing the changelings out. Unfortunately, in the Battle of Terok Nor, Jadzia ultimately still ends up losing her life, and with so few Trill left in the Alliance, Ezri still ends up with the Dax symbiont. Though this as an older war veteran Lieutenant Commander Ezri that's more sure of herself before taking on the symbiont. As a major player in the Alliance, Dukat feels he's owed a statue on Bajor for liberating it from the Dominion. Kai Wynn isn't too popular after being a Dominion collaborator, and Dukat, after studying about the Coast Emojin for years now, sacrifices the Kai to reveal the book's secrets. The final battle between he and Sisko plays out very similarly to the Prime timeline, with the Sisko disappearing back into the white ether from whence he came. By now, the Dominion has been again backed up to Cardassia Prime, and it becomes a brutal, dragged-out conflict for several more years, before the Alliance is eventually successful in a full defeat. No armistice, but a total annihilation of every living thing on the former Cardassian homeworld. This war finally comes to a close, but only after billions more lives have been lost than in the Prime timeline. Also, there isn't a clear transfer of power in the former Federation space. The organization was one of the smallest parts of taking back the Quadrant after their initial defeat, and the Romulan Empire demands bringing Earth under their control. The Breen, Ferengi, and Gorn are also busy carving up Starfleet's former backyard, and this leads to a quadrant-wide war between the former allies for territory they feel entitled to for chasing the Dominion from it. In the wake of this, billions are dead, and all the former powers of Alpha and Beta quadrants are greatly diminished, with the Federation completely gone from the galactic stage. Just when the survivors of these two major wars in a generation set to picking up the pieces and trying to move forward, that's when the Borg come. With no Starfleet to keep in contact with Voyager in the Delta Quadrant, and no Federation for them to come back to, and Admiral Janeway to gather the technology she needs to deal the crippling blow to the Borg, the Collective show up looking to increase their ranks in the wake of their own war with Species 8472. And with few ships and technology left to stop them, they assimilate the bulk of known Alpha and Beta Quadrant space. Ironically, Voyager would make it home several decades after they did in the events of Endgame, only to find that Earth is a Borg planet, and they're nearly the only thing in the galaxy left of Starfleet. The single event of intervention by the Prophets in the Dominion War had wide-ranging implications that basically sparks the end for the Alpha Quadrant powers, even though the Dominion would likely be defeated in the long term anyway. Please leave in the comments what you think would have happened if the Dominion won the war. Until next time, I've been your host, Dustin Wing.